Hello BFAW graduating seniors, hello colleagues, and hello families. My name is Leila Wilson and I teach the BFAW Senior Thesis Seminar. It's usually at this time that we have the pleasure of being together when we get to express gratitude for the experience of working with these passionate students. This is when we celebrate these students' engaged commitment to their work and to their classmates' work. This is still such a time, though we're now aware of the distance between us more acutely. While we're honoring this milestone, many of us are also thinking about losses, great and small. We're being asked to weigh these experiences and put them into perspective. But the scale is off. The balance is unsettling. We're not just noticing, but we're also aware of how we see, as we are seeing. From peripherally watching the small versions of ourselves blurring in the corner of our screen as we're speaking, to tightening our mask before we help a neighbor, to giving strangers a wide berth on the sidewalk when we say hello. We've become more self-conscious, more cautious than ever before, seeing ourselves in this new light from a different angle. We keep wondering how we're being perceived, how we might even seem to be distracted or unkind. We want to make sure that we're not being misunderstood. This is what we as writers always navigate, but we do it with language through the space of the page. We use words to get through. Unlike any semester before it, this has been a semester of trying to find the right words. Despite interruption, regardless of confusion, notwithstanding difficulty, these students have worked to be as clear and specific as possible. They've done this all despite. Even though they've been sheltering in place without access to their usual studio space, bookmaking equipment, cordial hallway chat, and the rich and varied materials and modes of making that they've come to know as a part of their practice, they've nonetheless found focus and framed it. They've worked to keep the news at bay and to cloister with the hope of concentration, all the while knowing that we're living out a historical unfolding. These are students that have not been overshadowed by the pall. They've been making and pushing back against circumstance. Some of these pieces show us how deeply these students have come to accept that anything can happen, and that what seems like fantastical possibility might actually be a viable threat. They highlight their impressive imaginations and strong sense of imagery in poems, essays, and collages. In their stories, cartoons, and scripts, they show us to listen to a multiplicity of voices and to cohere them in a dynamic narrative force. These works are funny, they're sad, they're unpredictable, and they show that the risk has been worth it. I'm impressed with how these young writers have come to cope and push forward notwithstanding. I'm impressed by how they've harnessed their creative forces nonetheless and have become, quite beautifully, more themselves. I want to give a very special thank you to Amber Day and Kay Fleister, who make everything work. Thank you to my fellow faculty, to Sally Alatalo, to Mark Booth for their help and support throughout the term. Thank you to Jake Fournier, Carrie Ruckel, and the awesome IRFM team. Thank you, Dean Dawn Gavin, Paul Jackson, and Kevin Kemp. And thank you to Brianna Douglas, who has been my awesome teaching assistant this semester. And to my students, thank you. Perhaps it's not despite. Perhaps it's not regardless or notwithstanding, or even nonetheless. Perhaps it's actually all the more so. Class of 2020 BFA students, I congratulate you, all the more so. I congratulate you to a greater degree. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jake Fournier, and I'm a poet and the instructor for the second section of the BFAW thesis writing workshop. I want to begin by thanking all my colleagues in the writing program for the incredible work they put in to make this reading, not to mention the semester as a whole, possible. I want to thank especially Leila for sharing course design and providing guidance so that we could ensure some uniformity of experience across the two sections, Sally for her excellent leadership, Mark for providing creative consultations for students as they put together their reading videos for today, and Amber and Kay for making sure the ship ran smoothly before and after the transition to online learning. But most of all, I want to thank my students themselves. This was an exceptional group, an exceptionally talented group of writers. They've also proven themselves exceptionally resilient in the face of this semester's unique challenges and the profound changes that have taken place in day-to-day life for all of us. They have diverse interests and have produced a diverse body of work, not just in terms of genre, where their writing covers the full spectrum, from lyric poetry to graphic memoir and realist fiction, but also in terms of imaginative vision and creative sensibility. From the first day, well before we had a sense of the challenges we'd be facing, these students, and really all of them, proved themselves capable of the incredibly difficult emotional work that comes with this nebulous process we call workshopping. There's a dual vulnerability, a double exposure to it. First, there's the horror of subjecting one's own work, which can so easily feel like an extension of one's own person, to the scrutiny of other people. But there's also the extraordinary felt risk of exposure that comes whenever we share with other people what we really think. Who honestly would want to go on the record with that? Especially when, because of the process itself, we have to confront the possibility of change, to reconsider our basic assumptions of what's good and bad, and not just in our art, but in the underlying fabric of thought that determines the sort of art we make. So that we come out on the other side realizing that whatever it was we said on Friday isn't what we think at all. These students were always supportive of each other in that process, and they proved themselves resilient long before our collective resilience began to be tested by this catastrophic pandemic. One of the goals of the class, as I saw it, is to help these writers to build a bridge that spans from the institutional setting they've known into a writing life. Some kind of independent and self-driven process with no paid instructor or coordinated team of administrators to help them along, or, to say, send your pages by Monday or else. This pandemic has given the students a trial run of that real world entropy, and they've really carried it off. They've all found a way to continue, and I have truly little doubt that there's a life in writing for any of them who decide they actually want one. So with that, I thought I'd share a poem for the occasion. It's a last poem, something of a self-eulogy by the great British poet Philip Larkin, and it's called The Explosion. It's thematic to an extent in that it treats a sudden and unforeseen catastrophe. And though it's a catastrophe that plays out much more quickly than the one we're facing, it captures something of what, and those who feel otherwise about this will really have to forgive me, but of what I see as the cosmic indifference to human suffering, where the universe never blinks and the cows only stop chewing for a second when we experience our greatest losses. I see this poem not only as a statement about the unique ability of the written word to give voice to those who have passed on, but of the peculiar position of art in helping us to make meaning out of the suffering we endure. At the end of the poem, you'll see a figure emerge from the ashes, a person transfigured into a kind of divine emissary. And he bears a token of both hope and a new beginning. I really think the student work that we're about to hear is a similar kind of token. So here's the poem. The Explosion. On the day of the explosion, shadows pointed toward the pit head. In the sun, the slag heap slept. Down the lane came men in pit boots, coughing oath-edge talk and pipe smoke, shouldering off the freshened silence. One chased after rabbits, lost them, came back with a nest of lark's eggs, showed them, lodged them in the grasses. So they passed in beards and moleskins, fathers, brothers, nicknames, laughter, through the tall gates standing open. At noon, there came a tremor. Cows stopped chewing for a second. Sun, scarfed as in a heat haze, dimmed. The dead go on before us. They are sitting in God's house in comfort, and we shall see them face to face. Plain as lettering in the chapels, it was said, and for a second, wives saw men of the explosion larger than in life they managed, gold as on a coin, or walking somehow from the sun toward them, one showing the eggs unbroken. So let's get to those eggs unbroken.
My name is Casey Smith, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from The Catacomb Boys, Episode 2, In Loving Memory of Misery. This scene takes place in the interior of the Trout family dining room. This is Memory Ritual 2. Andy, Gus, and Frank gather around the dining table. Andy and Frank sit across from one another. Gus sits at the head of the table between them. Outside the dining room windows, the sky is dark with cloud cover. Raindrops steadily ping against the window panes. Andy places caraway and cloves into a granite mortar and grinds them together with a matching granite pestle. Next, Andy pulls a match out of their pack. Striking it, Andy drops the match into the mortar, which ignites the ground caraway and cloves, creating not a flame, but smoke. Andy, Gus, and Frank watch the contents of the mortar begin to burn and smoke. Gus glances out the window. Should I crack the window open? Frank shrugs. Andy shakes their head, rising to dim the lights. Now the only light sources radiate from the mortar and several taper candles on the table. Andy picks up Nana's black-handled dagger as well and returns to the table. Andy pricks their thumb on the dagger. Gus cringes. Frank watches with growing interest. Sometimes this helps too. Andy lets a drop of blood drip into the mortar. The blood hits its target and a small flame leaps up to consume it. Andy feeds the fire once more before bringing their thumb to their mouth, licking the wound to soothe it. I didn't know blood was flammable. It's not. Andy cups the smoking mortar in their hands and presents it to Frank. Breathe. Frank shoots Andy a skeptical look. Ha ha. Frank's eyes dart to Gus, smiling with teeth. Gus shakes his head and shrugs. Pretend. Frank rolls his eyes. Frank breathes in the smoke. An eerie hush falls over the room. They are all taking this more seriously. Smells weird, like licorice? Gus nods. And Christmas. Put your hands here, like this. Andy grabs Frank's hands, placing his over theirs so they both cup the mortar. Gus watches from beside them. Andy closes their eyes. Breathe. I'll tell you what I see. Frank complies wordlessly. Andy breathes too. Again. Deeply. Frank's eyes flutter closed. He continues to take deep breaths, but they increasingly become shaky and ragged. Frank shivers. Gus? Yeah? Can you? I think I need a hand. Andy cracks open an eye and raises an eyebrow, but remains silent. Andy closes their eyes again. Gus hesitantly puts a hand on Frank's shoulder and looks relieved that it worked. It doesn't always work. Frank takes a deep breath. Yeah, thanks. As long as I can, okay? Yeah. Yeah. We're going somewhere. Okay. Gus looks between Frank and Andy with concern. Frank's eyes screw shut, clearly experiencing something unpleasant. Andy is sweating and grimacing. I see a red shoe in snow. Simultaneously, we see what Andy sees, Frank's point of view in blurry tunnel vision. A flash of this image, one red shoe, lost in the snow, vacated. Now the sun. Big. A flash of bright circular light growing increasingly brighter and bigger until it encompasses everything. Bigger than it's ever been before. Gus is wide-eyed. Frank and Andy both shiver, although Andy is still sweating profusely. It's cold. I want to go somewhere else. Party chatter fades in. A flash of B kissing Frank on the cheek. A kiss. Gus blushes. From a bee? Were you stung? Oh, a person named B. She's our friend. Party chatter continues. Flashes of blurry Christmas lights, red Solo cups, Nick's sneaking punch. A party. Gus's face darkens. I know where you are. Bee threw me a party at her house for my birthday. Her parents were out of town. Bee's rebellion. Party chatter. Bee yelling. Flashes of Bee yelling excitedly. Woo! Bee dancing. Bee chatting. Bee breaking something. Paul standing nearby, looking bored. We stay in this blurry flashback a little longer. Frank's point of view lingers between Gus and Paul. Gus doesn't even like parties. What's that asshole doing here? What's that asshole doing here? Flash of Paul passing Bee a joint. Love thy neighbor, eh? Flash of Gus laughing, hiding a wide smile behind his hand. You make Gus laugh. Flashes of Gus smiling fondly at Frank, looking almost lovesick, both drunk and infatuated. A door shuts. Party slightly muffled. Flashes of a bed squeaks, laughing, cursing, goofing around. A hand touches a knee. Oh. Flashes of a door swinging open, a red Solo cup falling to the floor. Gus looking shocked, afraid even. Someone dropped their punch. Flashes of blurry streetlights, snow falling. You're outside now. Flash of car keys turning. I left. Tears run down Frank's face. He grips Andy's hands so tight that his fingernails are digging in, breaking the skin and making Andy bleed. Andy doesn't pull away. Gus still clutches Frank's shoulder, but his gaze is down, eyes averted with something like shame, sorrow, discomfort. But Gus doesn't let go either. Instead, he squeezes Frank's shoulder. Where did you go, Frank? Frank opens his eyes and looks at Gus, but since he faces Andy directly, he sees something else first. Frank's eyes widen in fear as the devil's shadow stretches along the wall behind Andy, flickering in the candlelight. Holy shit! Frank lets go of Andy's hand and jumps back. As Frank loses corporeality, Gus's hand slips through his shoulder. What the fuck is that? What? Gus flips on the lights. Andy sets down the mortar, steeling themselves. Frank continues to shrink away from Andy, blinking tears out of his eyes. He points at Andy. They're the devil, man! What are you talking about? Their shadow! It had horns! Thank you for listening, and big thank yous to everyone who has helped me along the way. Special shout out to my pal Jack for being my rock! This is part of a much larger ongoing project. If your interest is piqued, you can reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @DirtyWetDog, and you can find all of my other contact information there too.
Hello. Like many presenting today, my project is very much so still in its fledgling stage. Beer, Water, and Honey is a graphic memoir set during last Christmas when I went home to North Dakota, and there is nothing more that I want to do than go home to North Dakota right now. I dream of it constantly. The story is centered around my family and their altered lives from our grandmother's dementia, who had been recently placed in a full care nursing home only a few months prior. My goal in this piece is to focus on disability from my grandmother's, named Honey, to my own, as well as the trauma which impacts our behavior. Yeah, it's been very interesting to work on it in light of everything. But I still think working on it is important, especially with both of us being high-risk individuals, and every day with her still off from afar being a blessing. So without further ado, Beer, Water, and Honey. Honey, I'm home. I take my first steps into the long-stopping Nodak air, but no one is there. Hey Josh, you slept in, didn't you? Yeah. It's okay. You want to sleep in, don't you? Yeah. I'm so manically dazzled by being here, I don't care. I'll call Dad. He slept in, didn't he? He sure as shit did. I don't even realize how cold it is until I am told. I'm in town. I'll be there before you freeze. Oh my God, please hurry. The cold congeals my paper skin, my stiff, spasming fingers. Then I realize I have been left in the phantom of my childhood. Hey, kiddo. Dad. My breath catches like a deer caught momentarily in the pasture fence. It's so good to see you. There are more pages, which are works in progress, but each page has taken about 10 hours plus. It's a very time-altering progress, and each page is heavily referenced with photos, which my father has been taking. But thank you all for your time, and I also want to give a shout out to everyone, especially in the creative writing department. Beth Hetland for always being there, constantly getting me into comics, as well as Mike Freiheit, who really put in the hours for helping me nail that style. Thank you. Everyone stay safe and wear a goddamn mask for all of us who are immunocompromised. Peace.
A death the ground remembers. In the road corner of the yard, small slopes of fur-covered mussels lie silent, stillness in the shape of severed motion. Snow hid the body in a fading burial before spring painted all but the grave in green. I could not touch him. Death had blossomed from the pit in the ground, stressing a silhouette of dead grass. I saw his skeleton in summer. Soil sparked again, and blue stars grew from the raccoon's skull. I will unlearn aspirations of control and hand myself to soil, feeding what succeeds me. I'm carved by mice, torn and twisting teeth, weeks before browned bone breaks through dirt. In a year, the ground buckles beneath my body, packed with grass flamed green. I die in the yard and drain down, driven by rain. Particles in a seed to wield when it sprouts, shot out on pollen, launched home. I'm hair, nail clippings in the bathroom, dust in our carpet, floating up to the light bulbs. I burn and sing from the filaments.
Hi, I'm Julie Hornedo, and this is the first few pages of a novel I'm working on, titled Walking the Left-Hand Path. The wet sky hung oppressively, bearing down on a land unlike our own, yet just as wild and coated in blood. The land of the limbic dead, where ill-fated creatures roamed, witches among them. The clouds of night had not yet been burned off in the morning's heat, when the dust rose and the ground opened up. The innocent hand of a child poked through the pile of dirt and felt around nervously. Inch by inch she pried her way out and hauled her body into the diluted light of day. She was lucky, or perhaps blessed, to be reborn under the shelter of a hidden sun. The young witch could be no older than 6, and this was the only thing about her that had remained unchanged in death. The rest of her body was unfamiliar to her. Her skin was limp, her hair dark and stringy, her eyes wide and glazed over in milky white, and her breathing was ragged and uneven. She muttered her name under her breath, her true name. Elsie Perrobeck, Elsie Perrobeck, Elsie Perrobeck. She clung to it desperately, as did all those grief-born like her. Elsie lay there for a moment in shock. She was spent, but with every moment awake, she felt her strength renewed. There was something powerful coursing through her. She was an exhumation, a corpse, spit into new life, teeming with magic. The child struggled to orient herself. She didn't know where she was or how she got there, or at least she had some idea, but decided not to think about it. The abyss of the grave in front of her was less welcoming than the endless sea of field she found herself in, brown and crinkling in the wind. Something, or some feeling, was calling her westward. In the shadow of the tall grasses she tried to walk, but her little body just sagged toward the ground. Her limbs were impossibly heavy, the bones within them burdensome. In defiance, she crawled. Cautiously she went through the mire, the rushes snapping back in her face as she wove through them. The going was slow and tiring, and the field of golden grass seemed to stretch on forever. She was panting, her brow drenched with a filthy sweat. After a while, exhaustion overcame her. She stopped to catch her breath, having in death failed to escape the need for life's comforts. Sitting there, Elsie began to comprehend her own helplessness. Birds grinned above her and bugs squirmed below her. Everything was alive and in communion, as if they were cells beating together in a single shared heart. Perhaps it was just her own pulse quickening in her ears, but the world was swirling with things she didn't understand and couldn't clearly make out. Her eyes seemed to be no help but to cry the bitter tears of a child lost and alone. She wailed into the friendless landscape. The tears drew clean lines down her silt-smeared face, and she tried to wipe them away, but only succeeded in dirtying her face further. Elsie closed her eyes, and in the blackness saw a mass of warm light approaching. The light grew brighter, and she opened her eyes to see the ground sloth Megathrim, tall, lumbering, and warm. He stood above her, his presence calm and comforting. She reached out and grabbed his fur, caked green with moss. It was thick and wiry and smelled of rain. Without a second thought, the great mask-faced sloth of the forest reached down his long blunt claws and plucked her out from among the detritus. He slung her effortlessly across his back and carried her eastward. Elsie did not question it. For the first time she felt safe, and so in her mind she called him mother, and the sloth heard her. Elsie knew nothing of fathers, and did not have a mother, at least not in this life. Her second, unnatural birth was achieved only by early death. It was the unrest in the young spirits of witches that drove them from their graves and into the land of the limbic dead, a world they entered foolish, afraid, and alone. They were desperate to escape the pain of death, desperate for guidance in a violet place they didn't understand. For this reason, Elsie was wont for a living mother of flesh and bone. McGathrim knew this and did not mind. He was sent to her, and he would carry her. He would be this witch's mother, she who was born of stolen youth and soft tarnished stalls, born of blood and violence and months under the earth, a subliminally concocted creature. On that day, Elsie was put on a path. She was taken from her grave, from her birthyard, from the shaded fields of dry grasses, and the isolation from which she was born, and into the white-hot sun, burning through the morning clouds. Her bare skin burned, but she could not feel it, cold and numb. The sloth ambled along. She clung to his back like a leech, but he did not mind. She hugged her mother tight, pressing her face into his warm fur, closer to his heart. Hearing it beat in time with her own, bloodless as it was, she knew she was no longer alone. Like that the sloth and the witch went, over the valley of her birth toward the ever-looming white tower, still a mere needle in the distance. As they walked, the land seemed to close in on them. The grasses became thinner, the hills sharper. Elsie did not know why they walked, or to where, but she was content to stow along, at least until her thirst became too much. She started to wail. McGathrim took her to rest on a cliffside, beside the dead trunk of a tree, charred and split by lightning on some stormy day long ago. To their luck, or McGathrim's keen intuition, a storm had also passed the eve before, and it had left a puddle of rainwater in the crevice of the fractured tree stump. With McGathrim's encouragement, Elsie leaned down to the water and slurped. She was refreshing herself when the shrill battle cries of witches began to echo in the distance. The little witch could feel their hearts beating rapidly in fear and bloodlust. The air was thick with the sudden pop of spark and grumble of earth. Somewhere nearby, the White Army was raising a village, and Elsie coughed up the acrid smoke that drifted their way. Somewhere below them, out of sight, a witch-mother fled from the chaos, dragging her witch-daughters in tow. The stone city had fallen years ago, and the birthyard with it, but her clan had survived in villages like hers, resisting the White Tower's presence. Before the tower came, the motherless children that emerged from the birthyard were adopted by the clan and raised by witch-mothers to be skilled and hard-working. Now, the remains of the clan could only treasure the children they had left, more and more of which were being taken in raids like this one. The Bate clan weren't a militant people. They were architects and crafts witches. They didn't have their city anymore, but they had each other, and thought themselves safe behind the war front. But the White Army had advanced strides today, and the witch-mother fled west with the children to seek asylum in the clans beyond. Elsie couldn't see them, but she could feel them, and it was a strange thing to feel. The presence of other bodies, other witches. Their attackers followed swiftly, closing in on the small family. A horrible, sneering voice called out, nasally and barbed with bitter pleasure. "Tisk, tisk, tisk, playing house, I see. You Bate witches have known for a while now how the goddess feels about that. What nonsense were you filling these children's heads with?" "Please, just let them go. Take me," the witch-mother pleaded. "You? What could I want with you? No, I think I'll take the children, thank you. It will be hard work teaching them to be the right kind of witch." The witch-daughters struggled and screamed, using their voices to throw pebbles at the attackers, but it was no use. "Sampin, get them under control and take them away," the nasal voice barked. The children's screams were muffled, and the harsh sound of metal on flesh rang out. A heart stopped, but Elsie did not know which. She could smell the sharp iron scent of blood in the air, and enticed by it, found herself crawling closer to the cliff's edge to see what had happened. Below her stood General Eris the Gold Witch, with a sinister smile and unblinking eyes. She wore bleached leather armor with gold pauldrons and was holding a golden flail, which she dragged through the dirt like a toy. At her feet was the mangled body of the witch-mother. And blood, so much blood, a dark vortex of it that Elsie felt drawn to. It swirled in front of her eyes, and she leaned closer and closer, only a second away from falling off the cliff head first. Luckily, McGathrim had the good sense to pull her away by the hair. He decided right then that it was time to move on. Elsie climbed unenthusiastically onto his back, and as they walked away, watched the blackened tree shrink out of sight. Even after McGathrim had put some distance between them, she could not forget the blood. Thank you.
Milk teeth. Milk teeth are held in place by dissolvable roots that will snap easily when agitated. When I found this out, I would go into the blue bathroom and sit on the edge of the blue bathtub with my fingers so far back into my mouth that I would choke, wiggling any tooth that would give even slightly. Most of the time, my dad would be across the hall reading to me, unaware that his 7-year-old daughter was in the process of removing her own teeth one by one. I knew I couldn't remove them all at once without making my parents worry, so I worked on them over the course of weeks, months even, but before 4th grade I had already lost all of my baby teeth. Normally the roots of primary teeth will dissolve slowly when the adult tooth begins to grow, so once the tooth falls out, it will quickly be replaced. I was without my front teeth for longer than any of my classmates. The sound of digging my teeth out was deafening. Each time I heard a tiny root snap, the creaky sound echoed in my head until the next root snapped and creaked and echoed over the first. When the final root ripped and my gums released my tooth, it sounded like a suction breaking, like a cork from a bottle, but the only liquid contained was metallic blood from my gums. Before even rinsing blood off my hands and tooth and mouth, I would sit in front of the mirror, legs bent under me in the dip of the sink, knees pressing against the faucet painfully, and press my tooth back into the bloody hole in my mouth to see if I was able to fit it back in. The hollow spot would close slightly right after the tooth was removed. The removed tooth became cold and lifeless as soon as it was out of my gums and sounded like a rattle when it hit my other teeth. I had to take tissues to bed with me and tear small pieces off to force into the empty socket, or I would bleed all over my pillows during the night. Excerpts from my uncle and nothing else. My uncle brought me an orchid so soft and lush that I thought it was made of velvet at first. The petals were bright purple with darker purple veins that were visible when the sun hit their flesh. Where the petals met the middle of the stem, clean white streaks bled into the purple gradually. The flowers were tall and strong, and the pot that held them was purple too, but a deeper and darker shade than the leaves themselves, with small half circles that protruded off the ceramic base every half inch. I could make out all of the tiny bones in his hands when he handed me the plant. Occasionally, jaundice can be an early sign of pancreatic cancer, but in most cases there aren't any symptoms until it's too late. Jaundice is tricky because it can present when the cancer is barely forming, or can present when the tumor has grown so large that it blocks the bile duct that connects the pancreas to the liver. When I looked at my uncle's skin, it was completely yellowed. When I looked into his eyes, I saw they had yellowed too. His cheeks were missing the fat that used to fill them, and his eyes were deep in his skull with tired blue bags, despite the fact that he was sleeping more than he ever had before. He had to leave his office in the middle of the day and cancel his afternoon appointments because he was unable to safely work on patients' mouths. There was a grocery store by my parents' house, a 10-minute drive, but an hour away on foot. It was pouring rain when my mom drove past my uncle walking down the sidewalk to the store. He didn't even want anything from the store, he just wanted to be outside walking. He had no umbrella or coat, just a green bucket hat with tiny slits cut all along the seam where the brim met the body of the hat. My uncle's head was too big to fit comfortably in without the tiny cuts. My mom was screaming and scared when she brought him back to the house. I didn't understand why it was such a big deal that he wanted to go for a walk. I thought it was a good thing. My mom got him a gym membership so he could walk in a safer environment. I went with him one day and his sneaker came undone while on the treadmill. He fell hard and fast and smashed his nose against the multicolored speckled carpet. His tight-fitting hat flew off and far away from him. I got to him first before a crowd of people came to check to see if he was okay. His nose was bleeding and there was a spot on the carpet from where he was dripping. He was embarrassed about falling, more embarrassed about his exposed head, bald from chemo. I got his hat while people helped him up. When the paramedics got to the gym, he was more angry than embarrassed and refused to go to the emergency room with them. In the car ride home, he thanked me for getting his hat so quickly and said nothing else of the incident. 8 months after my uncle moved in, his chest started rattling. It sounded like he had swallowed marbles and they had gotten trapped deep in his chest, somewhere dark and wet. With every breath he took, they rumbled and smashed against one another. I sat alone with him and told him I was sorry for not visiting enough, even though we lived together. His voice was a whisper when he told me there was nothing to be sorry for. The truth was I did visit him as much as I could. Even if I sat with him every day, all day, I would have been apologizing for not spending enough time with him. Before my uncle was born, my grandma prayed to God and told him if he ever gave her a child, she would dress them in blue and white, the Virgin Mary's colors, every day for the first 7 years of their life. She kept her promise. My mom and her siblings dressed my uncle in a blue and white striped button-down and khakis when everyone came to say goodbye. We called Tufts Medical School and waited for students to pick up my uncle's donated body. When they carried him out the front door, I saw 2 of them struggling to raise him into their van. He was still a massive man with long legs and arms, just none of the padding he had before. They hadn't secured his head when they lifted him. His head flopped back and his mouth opened. Even in the darkness, I could see his teeth reflecting the light from outside my house. Thank you.
Freshman year. Freshman year started out with a glow of promise. It actually went pretty well. I made friends, Ella, Jake, Alice, and Jess. We didn't have a lot of classes together, but we always hung out before homeroom started. Life at home was pretty okay, too. One of our dogs, Copper, was getting older and needed to go out more often, and I enjoyed how grown up I felt when I walked him. Things weren't perfect, but it wasn't like I had to go through anything alone. School-based was a fun, safe place that was open to students, but separate from the school. They had actually helpful counselors, not just shitty guidance counselors. My friends and I went there during lunch because it beat the cliquey cafeteria and they had a Wii. We'd also stay after all the time. They took us on free field trips, too. I started talking to Travis, one of the counselors. He understood me better than anyone else had. Before homeroom. What are you eating? A tangerine. That's too yellow to be a tangerine. You're too yellow. You know I'm half Chinese, right? I didn't mean, Dude, it's fine, I'm just giving you a hard time. For a while, it seemed like everything was going to be really good. Much better than the hell that was middle school. To be continued.
My name is T.A. Harris, and today I'm going to be doing a reading of my project entitled Cake and Company. The chapter we're going to be looking at is called Johnny Go Lately. Thank you very much, and I sincerely hope you enjoy. Johnny Go Lately. The Quick Quackery, known colloquially as the Quick Quack, had first been established during some bronze-toned yesterday. A traveling snake oil salesman in the area had hit it big time when entering the pharmaceutical game, spurring the chain into its profitable existence. Regionally well-regarded, Quick Quackeries had provided half-price remedies, salves, and fixes for the best part of 100 years. With over a dozen locations across the northern Corn Belt, it was a medicinal staple for the towny folks. The local Quick Quack was located inside of a strip mall, next to a vacant record store and a family-owned laundromat. It was, in fact, the least lucrative location in the region. Why? To start, the manager of the quackery was a fellow named Sal Mundy. Mr. Mundy was a middle-aged man with a red, heart-shaped face, who didn't look happy most of the time. But then, neither Johnny Cake nor Bumpkin looked particularly happy most of the time either. Sal Mundy was prone to working short shifts, taking long breaks in his parked car, and keeping it to 10 words or fewer when addressing his employees. Most days he came to work angry, but every so often there were days when Sal's usual, steely red mug turned a dark and noticeable shade of bluish-gray, and his eyes took on a woebegone look. Why Mr. Mundy had hired Johnny Cake and Bumpkin as dispensers at the quackery was neither here nor there. When Bumpkin's pickup truck pulls up, there's an old bird waiting there, trembling outside the locked pharmacy door. Johnny nearly stumbles blindly into her, before Bump's arm quickly jerks out and yanks him back with all the snap of a rubber band. Johnny Cake yelps, curses at him, and then regains his footing on the pavement. "Lovely morning, Miss Lady," Bumpkin chirps, waving a floppy hand. Then he bows, grandly. "What can I help you with?" "Sir, I believe it's past 1 o'clock now. I'd thought the Quick-Quack was supposed to be opening at 9 this morning," the little lady fiddles with her spectacles, eyeing each of them suspiciously. "Nope." Bumpkin strategically leans his slinky form against the sign on the door, which would tell her otherwise. "Saturday, late hours." "I had thought today was Sunday." "That's what I said, lady." Bumpkin kicks the quackery door open, as Johnny Cake flips the neon on the window from closed to open. "I only need my prescription, sirs," the old bird yelps, straightening the straw hat perched atop her head. She tries to follow close behind the two fellows, but struggles to keep pace. Inside the quackery, dust has settled on the cracked white tiles of the floor, and the little lady kicks it up with the tapping of her shoes. But the dust sticking to the windows keeps the space comfortably dim and gray. In one long, avoidant stride, Bumpkin hops behind the counter, disappearing amidst the shelves and vials. Yeah. Johnny Cake's job now. He hunches over the register, his fingers slipping slightly over the keys as they clack out nothing in particular. "What's the, name and prescription for that?" "Mrs. George's Alls Wellington." She clutches a dramatically pearled hand to her chest. "Wife of the recently deceased Mr. George's All Wellington. I'm here for 800 milligrams of grief." 800 milligrams grief, got it. Just a sec. Johnny Cake retreats to the back of the pharmacy. He catches an unmistakable whiff of honey oil when beneath the tall shadows of the shelves, and assumes that old Bumpkin must be lurking somewhere nearby. Already knowing where to head to, once he gets to the shelf, he runs his fingers over each of the vials. In the waiting room, the window is still babbling, raising her voice higher so that Johnny can no longer pretend not to hear. "This will positively certain to enhance my morning experience, correct? I've been struggling with getting things just so." Yes, guaranteed to enhance," Johnny Cake yells back. "It'll say right on the label." His fingers land on a bottle with squared edges, and his thumb traces a G imposed on the front. There you are. His hazy head rushes when he turns, and he very nearly stumbles into a shelf en route back to her. Dumbass, Johnny reminds himself. "That seemed to take you quite a while," the old bird observes as soon as he reemerges. "Was it very difficult? I'd hate for you to get the prescription wrong." "Choke," Inner Johnny Cake curses. "Nope," Outer Johnny Cake replies. "Here you go." The old lady hums, accepts, and extends a fist of dollar bills in her translucent blue hand. Johnny Cake leans dramatically across the counter, partly to address her and partly just because his tall, tranquilized body is dog-tired from standing upright this long. "Now, this is good stuff. It hits hard, so just remember to take it in small doses. Just a capful will do you all right." She considers it. "I haven't cried yet. Will it make me cry?" "Oh yeah." Right then and there, the quivering old woman measures out one careful capful, and then studies her medicine. sloshing the black and sludgy liquid around as she eyeballs it. After a short while of this, she throws it back down her gullet. By the time she's exited the quackery and back out onto the parking lot, she's already wailing loudly.
Dear Mom, do you remember the first time I smoked weed? It was at Sydney Meyer's house, out of a wooden pipe she bought in Peru. We blew the smoke out of Sydney's bathroom window. The smell traveled through the vents and into her parents' bedroom. Call your mom or we will, they said. I called you and said I needed to be picked up right away. You asked why, and I answered honestly, we got caught smoking weed. Do you remember when you came to pick me up from Sydney Meyer's house and demanded that you speak to her parents immediately, and they pretended they were asleep? I sat in the passenger seat while you screamed and drove well over the speed limit. I don't remember what you yelled exactly. We ended up at the police station. You dragged me out of the car and into the brightly lit front office. I screamed and cried. I begged you to stop, but you talked to the receptionist anyway. I just caught my daughter smoking weed at a friend's house. She's underage. Let me speak to an officer. You wanted to turn me in. I begged you to stop, in tears, until something in your face shifted, softened. It dawned on you. You wanted to turn me in. Let's go, you said. You screamed at me all the way home. Dear Mom, when I think about growing up with you, I think about dancing. I think about loud music and singing. Do you remember when we used to dance around the living room to that one Black Eyed Peas song? Sometimes I forget that you used to be a dancer. It's hard to imagine you in a ballerina outfit. Remember that one time we made up a dance routine to Erotic City? Or when you took me to see Tom Petty in Cleveland when I was 8? Dave Matthews Band when I was 10? You were always so fearless at concerts. You danced like crazy while I stood steadily on a general admission folding chair so I could see over the sea of grown-up heads. Just last July, when you helped me move into this apartment, we had a drunk dance party in the living room. You have never stopped dancing.
Your wide wall laugh, and all its music, vibrating on thin glass, it still lives inside here. No matter what hole you were put in, your voice escaped your body. There are still some places to sing with you. Underneath our house was our home. Spotless corners that weren't too dirty to talk through. Ceilings never fell to our heads. Some were never too aggressive to live in. Couches weren't beds. Beds weren't storage. Plenty of air for every room, where we never felt choked with each other. I walked into my great-grandma's bakery and country, saw myself hung up in her cabinet, felt how close I had been held by her. You grabbed my 5-year-old hand out of my 21-year-old body. Voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella. My tiny legs got stuck inside my mouth. Voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella. I sat around my puddles of spit, waiting for you both to come back. Voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella, voy a orar por ella. Maybe I would have been kinder about your anger, if it wasn't always used as a weapon. Little notes of your voice, lines to make the name we share. I never had your good handwriting, but I had enough of your face. Our name, your arms I used to lay with, what I could keep when you left. Can I sneak some ginger into your soup? Keep your stomach calm? Lift the sky off your head? Let you stay here with me.
My name is Ian, and today I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a story titled Raised by Guns. First of all, I want to thank Jake and Matt for helping me during the semester with the story, and I also want to thank my classmates for their feedback, because without it, it wouldn't be possible for me to show this story today. So the short story is about two kids who go on a hunting trip with their parents. They are hunting geese, and the scene I'm going to be reading is the part where they found the third geese. They hunted 4, and this part is when they find the third one. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for being here today. Carlos followed. His arms got tired, and walking was getting harder every second. He felt how his boots stuck to the mud, and it took a decent amount of strength to move his legs. The sun was getting higher, and the heat increased. Even though he had his hat, the sunbeams still hurt his eyes. He was about to tell Thomas that he wanted to go back, but an unexpected noise shut him down. "Shh, shh, it's right there," said Thomas, mumbling. "I think it's still alive. Do you want to get it?" It took a second for Carlos to realize what was happening. He wasn't sure what to do. On one hand, he wanted to do it and show what he was capable of. On the other hand, he was afraid. Thomas sensed his friend's anxiety. "Whatever," he said, "I will do it." He knelt and approached the goose slowly. When he was close enough to touch it, the goose batted its bloodied wings. Thomas reeled back, and his heart began to pump harder. He approached the goose again. This time, he didn't hesitate, and with his right hand, he took the goose's neck. He squeezed as hard as he could. The goose thrashed. A gargling noise came from deep within it, and its black eyes shined in the sunlight. It squawked, and this noise upset Thomas. It grew louder on his ears. He was trying to break its neck the way his father had taught, but it wasn't working. He closed his eyes and wrapped his 10 fingers around the goose's throat. He pressed with all his strength. His blood was getting warmer, and his fingers started to burn. He felt how the throat was giving up, and noticed how the circumference of the neck got smaller. An ugly noise came out of the goose's beak. Its life escaped out of its eyes. Its tongue dropped from its mouth, a raw lump of meat covered with thorns. Thomas opened his eyes. He took his fingers and touched it. He felt the soft flesh and the hard thorn-like shapes. Then he exhaled and stretched his fingers 2 times. He flexed his knees and rubbed his hands, which had some drops of blood on them. Carlos, who observed everything, felt how his stomach turned upside down. He gave an awkward smile to Thomas and took 3 long breaths. He had heard about these things, but this was the first time he experienced them. He had no words to elaborate on what he just saw, but he felt that this act of raw violence had been something simultaneously grotesque and beautiful. He wasn't sure if he would be able to do something similar. He had killed a lizard once with a rock, but never with his own hands. The noise that came out of the goose's throat rang in his ears. He tried to raise it, but it stuck with him. Carlos was getting lost in his thoughts, but a sharp "fuck you" broke the spell. Thomas had said it to the goose. Then he took it by its legs and walked. He showed the dead body to Carlos and said, It was a tough one. Carlos nodded and followed Thomas, hoping that the last goose wasn't alive. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a good day.
October 24th, 2015. Dear Apollo, I was putting together a last-minute Halloween costume for Lorcan's party when I remembered that you couldn't make it. Well, duh. Who'd buy a plane ticket just to come home for Halloween weekend? I must have been so excited that I forgot. Or maybe I was just being hopeful. Originally, I was planning to go as my looming student loan debt, but Grace convinced me otherwise, since taping a sign to a black t-shirt would be considered low effort for Halloween festivities. So I decided to go as a male version of Oren Ishii from Kill Bill. I'm still deciding if I'm going to attempt the scalped head or not. The katana was a bit pricey though, but I guess it's worth it. After the party, I'll hang it above my ABBA poster in case of an impending zombie apocalypse. No, as decoration. I'm glad to hear you finally got your ears pierced. I always knew they'd look great on you. Everyone must be swooning. A 4.0 GPA and your freshman 15 was all muscle? You're out there killing the game like a post-book YA protagonist. Catherine is very lucky. Please sprinkle just an ounce of your glow up on me because I think I might be doing it in reverse. I look forward to seeing you over Thanksgiving break. You better not miss out on our DreamWorks movie marathon. Matt got all 4 Shrek movies. Personally, I'm itching to watch How to Train Your Dragon again. Doesn't Toothless remind you of Grace's dog, Oogie? In the spirit of Halloween, I'll leave you with some scary food for thought. What do you think happens if a fish is murdered in their fishbowl, then the fishbowl is moved away and the water is dumped out? Does the fish haunt the area where the fishbowl was, even though the water is no longer there? Does the fish float in mid-air? Spooky. Over and out, Elio.
Danny's. One especially humid summer, I witnessed my friend Johnny bring an entire rack of Miller Lite into a bar simply because he had carried it inside in an unmarked grocery bag. Erica and I showed up for a party on Milwaukee that turned out to be a bust. We ran into Johnny and his friends who were lingering outside the building. They passed on the memo about a lack of AC and unnecessary cover charge, so instead we grouped up and walked the mile to everybody's favorite spot. By the time we got there and waited in line, our skin was covered in sweat, shiny under the moon. I felt like I could eat the air. The bouncer checked our IDs, but he did not check the white plastic bag that dangled from Johnny's fingers. Any place is BYOB if you are willing and able. That bar is Danny's Tavern, an established hole in the wall. Danny, whoever he is, has treated me better than any 20-something in their converted basement, warehouse, attic, or studio space. The winding candlelit rooms that make up the small building provide a layout and ambiance that tops the kitchen LEDs of a Bridgeport bungalow or twinkle lights of a Logan Square basement. It is a long walk from my apartment, but just a swift bike ride down Bucktown's meandering side streets. There is almost nothing better than biking to Danny's when it's warm out, stomach already sloshing with champagne. When the sun has finally set, the bar sits and waits for passers-by, illuminated by a bright red Schlitz sign that dangles from the heavens. On a good night, a line outside dizzies down the street. People chitter and chatter, smudging out cigarette after cigarette until it's their turn to be let in. I've spotted local business owners, bachelorette parties, out-of-town musicians, looking for somewhere to get a drink after a show, and kids excitedly brandishing their fake IDs, talking loudly in line about being underage. Sometimes the crowd looks like it got infiltrated by a frat, and I stand there wondering how the Wrigleyville paralegals and tech bros found their way here. Did you take a wrong turn? I know it's 1:30 in the morning, but weren't you just at some sports bar watching a college football game? Don't your pressed button-downs have too much starch in them for you to be dancing on girls like that? Back outside, the bouncer hands out playing cards from his shirt pocket to those who aren't leaving for the night, but going outside for a smoke. Patrons grip the playing cards, kings and queens and jacks, like special tokens. Leave accidentally, and you'll return home with a memento. Johnny carries the bag full of Miller Lite in between his legs so nobody will knock it in the crowd. He and his friends head to the back while I squeeze my way to the front of the bar. Erica waits with me. I count my already counted bills 3 more times as I wait my turn to order us gin and tonics. I pull out my phone to call Mallory and Sylvia and turn to Erica, who's already texting. We don't have to say anything to each other to signal that it's time to invite the whole city. Soon enough, every other person in the crowd is somebody I know or somebody's friend, and I have to scream "hello" over the music and give a sweaty hug in order for the night to go on. I have not yet run into anybody's parents, although one day I vow I will bring my own. I know Mom and Dad will appreciate the disco ball twirling from the ceiling, reminding them of their pantsuited nights dancing at Excalibur far before I was born. The regular DJs play music all on vinyl, their sweaty foreheads a bright sheen in the otherwise darkened room. Erica and I bounce from wall to wall, shimmying to songs by the Tramps and Patrice Rushen. For a moment, we take a break and put our backs to the in-unit air conditioner to dry our sweat. I spot Mallory and Sylvia sidle in. Sylvia leans over the nearest empty table and downs 3 abandoned drinks. She smiles, her eyes widening bright under the candlelight. We jump back into the crowd when we hear the buzz of I Feel Love. I have never felt so blessed by the voice of Donna Summer. Mallory does a vibrant dance number with an old guy in a glittery dinner jacket. As the night goes on, the DJ shifts decades, and the crowd sings to early MIA, then to LCD sound system. I can feel the wooden floor bouncing under my boots. When the crowd starts to thin between songs, Erica and I dodge a group of older, vaguely Eastern European tourists. They're all regulars here, all with the same blonde, overly gelled crew cuts, all eyeballing the girls in the crowd. The Eastern Europeans will say almost anything in an effort to flirt, a reminder of how laughably easy it is to get hit on at Danny's. I love a gothic, one yells in a thick accent. Is it a full moon? Says the other, bowing low at me. Like the frat crowd, I never know how they find their way here, but I admire their persistence. We are married, Erica yells. Laughing, we dart into the bathroom, which rarely has a line because these bar-goers understand urgency. In one bathroom, wads of thick white toilet paper splatter the blue ceiling like a cloudy midnight sky. If you are frequent enough at Danny's and look up to spot the decor, you add a piece of your own. Wet the teepee with water from the sink and thwack it forcefully up into the ceiling, making your mark as a cloud in the sky. In the other bathroom, every inch of the wall is covered in scribbles. It is nothing unique to the regularity of crude bar bathrooms, but I love it here especially. The mirror is tagged with messages like JB plus CR forever, call Jimmy for a good time, scrawled with a phone number, and if you're reading this, you're drunk, LOL. I always carry a Sharpie on me. Look closely, you'll find my name.
This first poem is called Distant Material. Dead stones, thank God for your good maps. Your data on the center of the Earth and other planets. Your spiral and the epic gases of sun. At night, you ooze an identical convivium, shooting the shit, ceaseless percussion of halved darkness, your chatter, concealed strain in each syllable. Today's lullaby escapes into tomorrow's reappearing shadow, like a jaw detached to swallow another animal whole. My mouth parted for fallen ghost, your meteoric light burns a soft decay. This one, the title is sort of the first line. The octopus changes color while it dreams, the stuff of stardust delivered as collapse. Hanging on, saying, look behind you, and pulling a fast one. The octopus is a threat to boundaries. It could break a window if it wants a sharper shimmer of silk-woven light, wiggling on by while everyone stops and stares and competes to capture the salt in their aperture. The octopus does not have a fixed shape. It transforms into vibrations, lofting water like a fountain, brushing furrowed brows circled around the omen. The octopus's 500 million neurons turn radiant white. There is no distinction between brain and body, beating heart and arms, part self and part other. This is called Daybreak Labs. The fat on Daybreak set aflame, more holy than hunger, craving to give wine. You tell Daybreak to lie down, head on your wrist. Eyes are the only thing that float. You tell Daybreak about how you learned intimacy with a goldfish. The weight of its abandoned body brushed up against swinging noise, the unstill bowl that looked more like a jar. Daybreak laughs, but you take choking seriously. Serious as the wingspan and the first voice you heard keep alive death's dingy music, long enough to loosen a softer ensemble, like a candle burning fumes from a wax. Take note, Daybreak Labs, awakening 100 selves, glitter blowing through a prairie. Okay, this last poem is called Cavity. Dust is essential to a poem meant to be thrown to the sky. This poem is meant to be thrown to the sky. This is a poem about texture, comparing particles in the air to tattoos. Says, once you are tattooed, you spend your life broken down from the sun, a trail of retreat turned from leaking, soaked exits to bent back borders glamorous as gold. And inside, your tissue is breaking down ink, rings receding softer and softer. It is not a poem set in darkness, but this poem knows that it is warmest sleeping naked. In the body of this poem, every cell has consciousness. Sometimes this poem wants to be covered, It pulls the sheets over its head and crawls into itself, a wave loosening air to break itself open, reabsorbing curd-white foam. This poem scatters as it falls back down. The disintegration is demanding, but really it is the pieces that are left, bruises without the tension of a ballast. After all, this poem forms what it has lost.